You're
You're
gonna
gonna
catch
catch
a
a cold
cold
out
out
here.
here. Please take it,
Please take it.
she said, smiling to a
Thank you.
man who once owned skyscrapers and wealth. Now he sat beneath them, soaked in the rain, forgotten by the city he built. And when she stopped, holding out a paper cup of coffee, his life began again. The city never forgave failure. Daniel Ross once stood on the cover of Forbes, his smile sharp, his empire vast. Today, that same face reflected in a shattered cafe window, hollowed by ruin. The headlines screamed his downfall. Ross Industries collapses amid fraud scandal, though he knew he was guilty only of trusting the wrong people and thinking himself untouchable. Now let me tell you how this incredible story unfolded. Subscribe, share your heart in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from, because your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. He sat at the bus stop, rain dripping from his hair, the $1,000 suit now wrinkled and dark. The phone that once never stopped ringing had fallen silent. No one returned his calls, not the board, not the investors, not even the friends who once toasted him with champagne on penthouse balconies. Across the street, life went on. Umbrellas bloomed. People rushed past him without a glance. He was invisible now, like everyone he'd once ignored. A faint voice broke through the drizzle. "Excuse me, sir. Are you okay?" He looked up. A young woman stood hesitantly in front of him, clutching a paper cup from the cafe. Her coat thin. She couldn't have been more than 23. "I'm fine," Daniel muttered, his pride rising like a reflex. She didn't move. "You're sitting in the rain." "So is half the city," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. She gave him the cup of coffee, saying, "You're gonna catch a cold out here. Please take it." He defeatedly smiled. "Thank you." Her footsteps faded, but the warmth of the cup lingered. He stared at it for a long time, watching steam curl up like a fragile ghost. He hadn't realized how cold his hands were until that moment. As he lifted it to his lips, a question echoed in his mind. When was the last time someone did something for me without wanting anything in return? 2 weeks earlier. The boardroom was a battlefield of calm betrayal. Daniel stood at the head of the table, disbelief clawing at his chest as his CFO read the motion to remove him. "Effective immediately," the man said, eyes lowered. The board has voted to terminate Daniel Ross as CEO. He had built this company from a dorm room. Now they were cutting him out like a tumor. "I made you all rich," Daniel's voice cracked. "You're nothing without me." But they didn't meet his gaze. Security was called. When he stepped outside, flashbulbs blinded him. The world watched the mighty fall. Back in the present, Daniel sipped the now cool coffee, staring at the skyline that no longer belonged to him. His fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the hollow inside him that no money had ever filled. A bus screeched to a halt. He didn't get on. He didn't know where to go. From the corner of his eye, he saw the same young woman again, standing near the cafe window, typing on her phone. She wore a name badge. Lila Bennett, Intern, Ross Industries. The name struck him like a bell. She'd been one of his, an intern in a company he no longer owned. For a moment, he almost called out to her, but shame pressed the words back down his throat. That night, Daniel slept in a cheap motel on the edge of town. The silence was heavy, the air thick with disinfectant and regret. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the kindness in her eyes when she didn't have to care. She had seen him as a man, not a failure. As he closed his eyes, he wondered, if you lost everything, who would still see you as human? Comment below. What do you think? Does kindness from a stranger have the power to change someone's life when they've hit rock bottom? The next morning, Daniel woke to sunlight leaking through thin curtains and a pounding in his head that wasn't from alcohol. It was from everything he'd lost. His suit hung on the motel chair like a ghost of the man who wore it. He stared at the cracked mirror. The reflection didn't lie. The sharpness was gone. His once impenetrable confidence had melted into exhaustion and disbelief. His phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with an unfamiliar number. "Daniel Ross?" a hesitant voice asked. "Yes. This is Lila Bennett, from Ross Industries." He froze. She stammered. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to bother you, but I think you left some personal files in the system before you were removed. I thought you might want them." Daniel closed his eyes. The company had erased him, and here was an intern, someone who owed him nothing, still thinking of his files. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But I don't have access anymore." "I know," she replied. "That's why I wanted to help." There was a pause, filled with words neither of them knew how to say. "Where can I meet you?" They met later that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop near the park. Daniel arrived first, feeling out of place in his worn jacket. The barista didn't recognize him. A month ago, his face had been on the wall as a local hero in business. When Lila entered, the energy in the room seemed to soften. She wore the same modest coat, hair tied back, eyes full of cautious brightness. "You didn't have to come," he said, standing. "You looked like you needed someone too," she replied, sitting down. Her tone wasn't pity, it was simple truth. She slid a flash drive across the table. "Your files. I copied everything before they wiped your account." Daniel picked it up slowly, as though it were a relic of another life. "Why?" he asked finally. "You could get in trouble." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I figured someone should care about what you built." He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes didn't hold the fear or awe people usually showed him. There was warmth, curiosity, maybe even belief. "Lila," he said, his voice rough. "You're still working there?" She nodded. "For now. Though I think they'll cut the intern program soon. Things are changing fast." Something in her tone, disappointment, uncertainty, stirred him. "What do you want to do?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, leaning forward, "if you could do anything, without worrying about money or status, what would it be?" Lila hesitated, tracing the rim of her cup. "I'd start a mentorship foundation for kids who come from nowhere like me. To teach them they belong in places people say they don't." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Belonging. That word hit something raw. He nodded slowly. "That's beautiful." She laughed softly. "It's unrealistic." "So was my first company," he said. "Everyone told me it was impossible until it wasn't." Over the next few weeks, they kept crossing paths. At first by accident, then, unmistakably, by choice. Lila worked part-time at a local community center, helping underprivileged youth with career workshops. When Daniel found out, he volunteered to fix their outdated computers. "Mr. Ross," one of the teens said, squinting at him, "aren't you that guy from the news?" Daniel froze, shame prickling under his skin. Before he could answer, Lila stepped in. "He was. Now he's just helping us get the Wi-Fi to stop crashing." Laughter rippled through the room, easing the tension. Daniel shot her a look, half annoyed, half grateful. Later, as they stacked old monitors in storage, he said quietly, "You didn't have to save me back there." She shrugged. "You didn't need saving. You just needed reintroducing." He smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, after the kids left, they sat on the steps outside the center, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. "You know," Daniel said. I used to think losing everything was the worst thing that could happen. But lately, she prompted. He looked at her. I think it might have been the only way I could start over. Lila's eyes softened. Maybe some endings are disguised beginnings. He turned away, swallowing emotion. You talk like someone who's lost something too. She hesitated. My dad, when I was 16, he was a janitor at your company, actually. He used to tell me that no job is beneath anyone who does it with dignity. Daniel's chest tightened. I remember him, he said quietly. James Bennett. He used to clean my office at night. Lila nodded. He respected you, said you always greeted him by name. That's rare. For a long moment, silence hung between them, filled with ghosts and gratitude. Then Lila whispered, He died before I graduated. I took the internship to honor him, to work where he once walked. Daniel's voice cracked. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, smiling faintly. He'd like that we're sitting here now. You fixing things, me still believing in people. Something shifted between them that evening, not romantic yet, but undeniable. Two souls who had lost something precious found comfort in the reflection of each other's pain. As Lila gathered her things to leave, Daniel said, Lila, if I ever build something again, I want you to be part of it. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and belief. Then promise me it won't just be for profit this time. He smiled. It'll be for purpose. She grinned back. Then I'm in. They parted ways, the city lights flickering like stars that refused to die. That night, Daniel sat in the dark with his laptop open, Lila's words replaying in his mind. Some endings are disguised beginnings. He began typing, plans for a new project, something human, something that mattered. The first idea came easily. The Bennett Foundation. As he typed her name, he realized, this time he wasn't building for wealth. He was building because one person had seen something worth saving in him. Can a single act of faith from one person truly rebuild another's life? Or do we only change when we're finally ready to see ourselves differently? The Bennett Foundation was born in the quiet of late nights and shared dreams. What began as sketches on napkins in a cafe grew into something real. Workshops for struggling students, mentorship programs, and community funding drives. Lila handled the outreach with her steady optimism. Daniel handled the logistics and investments with his precision and vision. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing meaning. And somehow, meaning had her smile. 3 months in, the foundation caught media attention. Journalists began calling, curious about the disgraced CEO making a comeback through charity. Daniel tried to ignore the noise, but old habits die hard. One morning, he arrived at the office early, reviewing an email from a venture capitalist offering to fund an expansion. If Daniel's name alone was front and center, it was the same voice that had once lured him into ego and ruin. You could be back on top. You deserve redemption your way. He stared at the screen, conflicted. Lila walked in, her hair pulled up, holding 2 coffees. You're here early, she said, handing him one. He forced a smile. Couldn't sleep, thinking about the expansion pitch. She sat across from him, excited. I've been thinking we should open a second branch in the East District. The kids there don't have access to our workshops yet. Daniel hesitated. That's good. But maybe we should go bigger, national. We could bring in investors, corporate sponsors. Lila frowned slightly. Corporate? Daniel, that's what ruined Ross Industries. The pressure, the greed. We said this was going to be different. He met her gaze, jaw tightening. We need scale if we want real impact. Impact isn't measured in reach, she replied softly. It's measured in hearts changed. Silence filled the space between them, thick, uneasy. He looked away. You don't understand business. Her eyes flickered, hurt. And you don't understand people. That evening, Daniel called the investor. Use my name, he said. Just my name. The Bennett Foundation doesn't need two figureheads. He told himself it was strategy, not betrayal, that he was protecting Lila from scrutiny. But deep down, he knew it was pride. The same old poison, just dressed in charity's clothes. 2 days later, Lila walked into the office holding a folded newspaper. Across the front page, Daniel Ross returns. Former CEO launches Bennett Foundation revival. Not a word about her. Not a word about the team. She placed the paper on his desk, her voice trembling. You said we'd build this together. He stood, defensive. We are, but publicity helps the mission. Publicity helps you, Daniel, she snapped. You couldn't let it be about anyone else, could you? Her eyes were glassy but fierce. You promised this time would be different. He exhaled sharply, anger masking shame. Do you think the donors care about some intern's name? I built this. I'm the reason people listen. The words were out before he could stop them, and they shattered everything. Lila flinched as if struck. You built this? She whispered. You built us? He froze, realizing the weight of what he'd said. She took a step back. You know, my dad once told me that power tests who we really are. I think you just failed again. She turned, voice breaking. Goodbye, Daniel. And then she was gone. The following weeks blurred into gray. The foundation continued, but the soul had left with her. Donors still called, events still ran, but Daniel moved like a ghost through it all. He tried reaching out. Calls, messages, emails. Nothing. Lila had vanished. One night, alone in the empty office, he replayed her last words. You just failed again. He looked around at the space they'd built together. Her hand-painted motivational quotes still on the walls. Her handwriting on sticky notes reminding him to breathe, not break. He sank into his chair, tears slipping down unnoticed. For the first time, he didn't feel angry or ashamed. He just felt empty. He whispered into the dark, You were right. A month later, the Bennett Foundation's annual gala approached, their biggest event yet. The board insisted Daniel attend for optics, cameras, donors, applause, all the things he used to crave. As he stood behind the curtain, dressed in a crisp suit that suddenly felt too heavy, he caught a glimpse of the stage lights and froze. He couldn't do it. Not without her. The host's voice echoed. Please welcome the visionary behind the Bennett Foundation, Mr. Daniel Ross. He stepped out slowly, the applause roaring. He looked at the audience, faces smiling, cameras flashing, but all he saw was her absence. He gripped the microphone. His throat was dry. I was supposed to talk tonight about success, he began, about how failure taught me to rebuild. A murmur of approval. He took a shaky breath. But the truth is, I haven't rebuilt anything. I've just repeated old mistakes in new clothes. The room fell silent. I took credit for something that wasn't mine alone. The Bennett Foundation, his voice cracked, was never meant to be about me. He stepped back, chest heaving. It was built by someone who believed in kindness more than control. Her name is Lila Bennett. And if you want to know the truth, she saved me. Not my reputation. Me. The audience was still, the honesty cutting deeper than any prepared speech. Daniel lowered the mic and walked off stage before anyone could stop him. Outside, the night air was cold, bracing. He loosened his tie and looked up at the skyline. Somewhere out there, she was probably still helping others quietly, without fanfare. For the first time, he didn't feel like chasing her. He felt like earning her back. He whispered, "No more ego, just truth." Have you ever hurt someone by repeating an old mistake you thought you'd overcome? What does it take to truly change? Apology or transformation? The following morning, Daniel didn't return to the office. He walked the city streets instead. No destination, no plan, just footsteps, guided by guilt and longing. The air was cold, the kind that reminded you you're still alive even when your heart feels numb. Every building he passed whispered echoes of his past life. Once, he'd seen this city from the penthouse. Now, he saw it from the pavement. And strangely, it felt truer here. At a small intersection, a group of kids ran out of a community center carrying donated books. A banner above the door read, "Bennett Youth Outreach, a division of the Bennett Foundation." He stopped cold. Through the window, he saw her. Lila was inside, helping a little girl read, her laughter quiet but warm. There was no trace of bitterness in her expression, only peace. It was like she had turned their broken story into something beautiful anyway. Daniel stood there for a long time, the weight of his mistakes pressing hard against his chest. Then he stepped inside. The room fell quiet. Lila looked up, eyes widening slightly. "Daniel." He took off his coat slowly, his voice steady but soft. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came to help." The kids glanced between them, sensing something deeper. Lila swallowed, unsure what to say. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because this was never mine to fix alone." He reached into his pocket and placed a check on the table. "For the new literacy program. Anonymous donation." Her brow furrowed. "Why anonymous?" He smiled faintly. "Because not everything good needs my name on it." For the first time in months, Lila's lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. Over the next few weeks, Daniel returned every day. No cameras, no titles. He cleaned classrooms, fixed broken chairs, helped the kids with math homework. The man who once signed billion-dollar deals now spent hours teaching multiplication to a child who reminded him that worth isn't measured in wealth. At first, the other volunteers whispered, unsure if the rumors about him were true. But soon they stopped caring. They saw his sincerity in the way he listened, the way he laughed again, like someone reborn through humility. Lila kept her distance, but she watched. The arrogance she once despised was gone. What remained was a man stripped of ego, full of quiet kindness. One evening, as the sun set behind the city, she found him sweeping the entryway. "You missed a spot," she teased lightly. He turned, smiling. "You always were the better perfectionist." Silence lingered, a comfortable one this time. "I saw your speech online," she said finally. "The one at the gala." He froze. "Oh, it was brave." He exhaled slowly. "It was honest. I just wish I'd been that way sooner." Lila nodded. "Maybe timing doesn't ruin things. Maybe it just teaches us when we're ready." He looked at her then, really looked. "I don't expect you to come back, Lila. I just want you to know, you changed me. In seconds, yes, but it took losing you to understand why." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't change you, Daniel. You chose to change." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then let me choose again. Not as a CEO, not as the man who lost everything, but as the man who found something worth keeping." Weeks passed, and slowly, the walls between them began to fade. They started working together again, side by side, not as mentor and intern, but as equals. The Bennett Foundation flourished quietly, expanding into neighborhoods no investor had ever cared about. This time there were no headlines, only stories of lives changed. One afternoon, after a long day of teaching, they sat outside under the oak tree behind the center. Kids played nearby, their laughter carrying on the wind. Daniel leaned back, watching them. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd never met?" Lila smiled softly. "You'd probably still be running a company, miserable, successful, and alone." He chuckled. "You're not wrong." She tilted her head, studying him. "And me? Maybe still invisible. You gave me a voice, Daniel." He shook his head gently. "No, Lila, you gave me a heart." For a long moment their eyes held, years of pain and forgiveness, loss and rediscovery, all condensed into one silent acknowledgement. "We made it through." He reached for her hand, hesitant. She didn't pull away. A few months later, they hosted the Foundation's first community graduation, students who'd completed their mentorship programs, ready to step into the world. Daniel stood at the podium again, this time with Lila by his side. No spotlight. No grand applause, just heartfelt gratitude. He spoke briefly. "Years ago, I thought success meant being admired. Now I know it means being useful. I lost everything to learn that love, not money, is what rebuilds us. This foundation isn't about me. It's about the courage of one person who believed when I didn't deserve it." He turned to Lila. "Thank you." The audience, made up of students, parents, volunteers, rose in quiet applause. Lila wiped away tears, the kind that come when old wounds finally close. That evening, after everyone left, Daniel and Lila stood beneath the same city skyline where they'd once said goodbye. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, distant and soft. He looked at her, his expression open, unguarded. "I don't know where life will take us next," he said. "But if you'd ever consider—" She placed a finger gently against his lips. "I already have." And for the first time since his fall, Daniel didn't feel broken. He felt home. They stood there as the city lights shimmered like the past, trying to apologize. The rain began to fall, just like that first day. But this time, neither ran from it. He laughed quietly. "Full circle." Lila smiled, taking his hand. "No, new beginning." He kissed her then, softly, the rain blending with the tears neither was ashamed of. The next morning, a new plaque was installed outside the community center, the Bennett Ross Foundation. Built not by wealth, but by hearts that refused to give up. And for once, Daniel didn't look up at the skyscrapers he used to own. He looked at the children running through the rain, laughing, unafraid, and felt richer than he'd ever been. Because sometimes, the greatest comeback isn't reclaiming what you lost. It's finally understanding what was worth keeping all along. If life stripped everything from you, money, reputation, comfort, what kind of love or purpose would still keep you standing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If even a single moment, a look, or a word touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what part made you feel the most. Your words, your support, they're what keep this family of stories alive. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The next story is even deeper, more powerful. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Click the video on your screen. Your next story begins there.